The sound of shattering crystal echoed across the marble floor as my mother's trembling hand dropped her champagne glass. My father's expression transformed from confusion to disbelief to shock in mere seconds as the announcer's voice filled the ballroom. Our next Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, CEO of a $50 million AI company. 2 years of deception crystallized into this single moment of vindication when the son they thought was just a barista walked across the stage in a $5,000 suit to accept one of tech's highest honors. The air in the grand ballroom felt electric, thick with perfume, ambition, and old money. Silicon Valley royalty mingled with venture capitalists, crystal glasses clinking as deals worth millions were casually discussed over champagne. I adjusted my custom Tom Ford tie, a far cry from the coffee-stained apron my family still believed I wore daily. Across the room, they sat awkwardly at their assigned table, my father in his decade-old suit, my mother nervously smoothing her department store dress, my uncle scanning the room with suspicious eyes. They had no idea why they were really here. No idea that their disappointment of a son had orchestrated this entire revelation. My name is Michael Chen. 5 years ago, I committed what my traditional Asian American family considered the ultimate betrayal. I dropped out of Stanford University during my junior year. The memory of that night still burns in my mind, my father's hand slamming against our dining table, rattling the dishes as he shouted, "We crossed oceans, scrubbed toilets, sacrificed everything so you could have opportunities we never had. And you throw it away for what? Computer games?" My mother's silent tears cut deeper than any words could. But it was my uncle's cold dismissal that became my secret fuel. "You'll be back begging for your old job within a year. People like you, dreamers, they don't make it in America." For nearly 2 years after that night, they believed I was just another statistic, a college dropout working as a barista, wasting my potential making lattes for the very tech workers I could have been. What they didn't know was that every night, after 8 hours on my feet serving coffee, I was building something revolutionary. An AI platform that would eventually be valued at over $120 million, with offices in 3 countries and a client list including companies whose names they reverently whispered. Tonight, as the Forbes 30 Under 30 gala reached its pinnacle, their perception of me, their son, their nephew, their failure, was about to shatter spectacularly. I hadn't told them about my success. I hadn't shared a single achievement. Why? Because sometimes a single moment of revelation is worth years of secret struggle. Sometimes you need to show, not tell. Have you ever had someone so completely dismiss your dreams that proving them wrong became an obsession? Have you ever carried the weight of others' disappointment while secretly building something extraordinary? Then this story is for you. Because sometimes the people who love us most understand us least, and that gap can either break you or become the very thing that drives you to heights they never imagined possible. The Chin family arrived in California in 1992 with 4 suitcases, $800 in cash, and doctoral degrees from Beijing University that American employers treated as worthless paper. My father, once a respected engineering professor, took a job stocking shelves at a grocery store by day and worked as a janitor by night. My mother, who had lectured on comparative literature, cleaned houses and taught piano lessons to neighborhood children for $15 an hour. Our first home was a 1-bedroom apartment shared with another immigrant family. A sheet hung from the ceiling divided our living space. I slept on a folding cot beside my parents' mattress until I was 9 years old. Every night, I would fall asleep to the sound of my father's voice. "Study hard, Michael. In America, education is the only ladder. Without the right degree, you will struggle like us." By the time I was in high school, my parents had saved enough to buy a modest house in a middle-class neighborhood with good public schools. Our living room displayed no family photos. Instead, the walls were covered with my academic certificates, science fair medals, and math competition trophies. My perfect SAT score was framed like a priceless artwork. When Stanford's acceptance letter arrived, with a partial scholarship, my parents hosted a 10-table banquet at Golden Dragon Restaurant, inviting relatives I'd never met and neighbors whose names they barely knew. My father, who had never shown physical affection in public, hugged me in front of everyone, his voice breaking as he announced, "My son, Stanford University, Computer Science." In that moment, I wasn't just Michael Chun. I was the fulfillment of an immigrant dream, the validation of every sacrifice, the proof that America could indeed reward merit. My freshman year unfolded according to their carefully crafted plan. I joined the right clubs, networked with the right people, and secured a promising summer internship at a respectable tech company. But during sophomore year, while my classmates were interviewing for positions at Google and Facebook, I stumbled upon something that would derail everything, an open source project developing algorithms for predictive user behavior. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother set down her bowl, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "But what about your operating system's final? Your professor said it's crucial for summer internships." "This is more important," I insisted. "I'm building something that could change how websites interact with users." My father's face hardened. Games, he dismissed with a wave. Silicon Valley is full of young people wasting time on revolutionary ideas. How many succeed? 1 in 1,000? The others end up serving coffee. "Dad, this isn't a game. The algorithm works. I've tested it." My uncle, visiting from China, leaned forward. "Michael, your father crossed an ocean so you wouldn't have to struggle. Stanford opens doors to Google, Apple, stable companies with good salaries. Why risk everything on a fantasy?" By junior year, I stood at a crossroads. My grades had fallen below scholarship requirements. I'd turned down summer internship offers to continue developing my algorithm. Then came the catalyst. A prominent tech blog featured a startup working on something similar to my project, but their approach was fundamentally flawed. They had raised $1.2 million in seed funding. That night, I made the decision. If investors would fund an inferior version of my idea, I needed to go all in on my own vision. I needed to leave Stanford. I chose to break the news at Golden Dragon Restaurant, the same place where, 2 years earlier, my father had proudly announced my Stanford acceptance. I thought the public setting might temper their reaction. I was catastrophically wrong. Undefined. The first time I ran my modified algorithm on a test website, watching as it accurately predicted user drop-off points with 89% accuracy, I felt a rush unlike anything I'd experienced in formal classes. I began skipping lectures to work on my code. My carefully maintained GPA slipped from 3.9 to 3.4, then lower. Late-night coding sessions in my dorm room extended until sunrise. I found myself solving problems that my professors hadn't even considered. During a rare weekend visit home, buzzing with excitement about my project, I made the mistake of sharing my passion with my family over dinner. "I've developed an algorithm that can predict how users will navigate websites before they do it themselves," I explained, gesturing with my chopsticks. "It could revolutionize how businesses design digital experiences." My father's brow furrowed. "Is this for a class?" "No, it's independent research. I'm thinking of turning it into a startup." "Dropout." My father's voice rose sharply, causing nearby diners to turn. "Like a failure? Like a nobody? Some of the most successful tech founders dropped out," I countered. "Zuckerberg, Gates, Jobs. You're not them." His fist hit the table with such force that water glasses toppled. "You were Michael Chin, son of immigrants who worked 18-hour days for your education." My mother, typically the mediator, sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. It was the first time I'd seen her cry since my grandmother's funeral. "Michael," she finally whispered, "please don't throw away everything we've worked for. 1 more year. Finish your degree, then pursue your idea." But it was my uncle who delivered the final blow. Leaning across the table, Voice cold with certainty, he said, "Listen to me. I've seen many young people throw their lives away on fantasies. Silicon Valley success stories? 1 in a million. The others? Baristas and rideshare drivers who almost made it. In 1 year, mark my words, you'll be begging for your old job, and this brilliant idea will be forgotten." I left the restaurant alone that night, my decision unchanged, but my heart heavier than I'd anticipated. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of my family through the restaurant window. My father with his head in his hands, my mother sobbing into a napkin, my uncle speaking urgently, likely discussing how to fix the problem I had become. What they couldn't understand was that their doubt wasn't discouraging me, it was crystallizing into something harder and more powerful than mere ambition. It was becoming an obsession. My new reality materialized quickly after leaving Stanford. I found the cheapest apartment in Sunnyvale, a 380-square-foot studio with yellowing linoleum floors, water stains mapping the ceiling, and paper-thin walls that broadcast my neighbors' arguments in vivid detail. The rent consumed nearly 70% of my barista income. My bed was a second-hand mattress on the floor. My desk was constructed from milk crates and a door I'd found discarded near campus. My shift at Groundwork Coffee started at 6 a.m., which meant waking at 4:30 to catch the first bus. I learned the precise temperature for perfect microfoam, memorized hundreds of regular customers' orders, and smiled through aching feet and scalded fingers. By the end of each shift, my clothes reeked of espresso, my lower back throbbed, and my fingertips were cracked from constant exposure to sanitizing chemicals. But from 3 p.m. until the early morning hours, I transformed from barista to founder. The contrast between my days and nights was almost comical. By day, I was invisible, just another service worker in Silicon Valley's shadow. I served coffee to the very tech workers I hoped to someday employ, occasionally recognizing former classmates who looked through me as if I were part of the espresso machine. Once, a group of Stanford students, people who had been in my advanced programming class, came in and didn't recognize me in my apron. I made their coffees while they discussed their internship offers at Google and their signing bonuses. "Did you hear about Chin?" one of them asked another. "Dropped out to build some app. Total waste." Classic case of Stanford syndrome, thinking you're the next Zuckerberg, his friend replied as I handed him his latte, not even making eye contact. By night, hunched over my laptop in my apartment, I was building something revolutionary. My walls became a patchwork of flowcharts, user journey maps, and algorithm diagrams. Empty Roman cups and energy drink cans created small mountains around my workspace. I showered at odd hours, sometimes forgetting to eat, losing track of days. The only luxury I allowed myself was upgraded internet service, the fastest available in my building, which I prioritized over food. The physical toll was severe. I developed dark circles that no amount of sleep could erase. I lost 15 pounds from my already lean frame, my collarbones protruding sharply under my coffee shop polo shirt. My skin broke out from stress and poor nutrition. My only social interaction came from brief exchanges with customers and weekly video calls with 2 former classmates who were helping me code remotely in exchange for future equity. Customers at the coffee shop began leaving me larger tips, assuming I was ill or in trouble. One regular, a kind woman in her 50s, pressed a $20 bill into my hand one morning. "For food, honey," she said, "you're looking too thin." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was building software potentially worth millions while accepting charity for meals. One particularly bleak Tuesday morning, exactly 4 months after dropping out, I checked my bank account before heading to work. $127.53. My next rent payment was due in 10 days. I had been surviving on tips and the cheapest groceries available: oatmeal, eggs, rice, beans. That morning, I caught my reflection in the coffee shop window and barely recognized myself, gaunt, exhausted, with a defeated posture that mirrored exactly what my family had predicted. During my lunch break, I sat alone in the alley behind the coffee shop, eating a day-old pastry the manager had let me take. My phone rang, my mother, calling for the first time in weeks. I almost didn't answer, afraid of the disappointment I'd hear in her voice. "Michael," she said when I picked up, her accent thickening as it always did when she was emotional. "Your father and we are worried. Your cousin says he saw you at the coffee shop. You looked sick." I forced cheerfulness into my voice. "I'm fine, Mom. Just working hard. At the coffee shop? Or on your computer thing?" "Both," I admitted. "The coffee shop is temporary." Her sigh carried decades of worry. "Michael, it's not too late. Your father's friend at the university says you can reapply. With your grades before you left, they might reconsider." The suggestion felt like a physical blow. Return to Stanford as the dropout who couldn't make it? Become the cautionary tale professors would mention to ambitious students? "I can't, Mom," I said finally. "I'm close to something important." "Close to what?" "Starvation? Homelessness." Her voice broke. "We didn't come to America for our son to serve coffee." After we hung up, I sat in that alley for a long time, tears mixing with rain as a storm began. That night, after my shift, I reached my lowest point. I found myself on Stanford's website looking at the readmission policy. The cursor hovered over the application button. My uncle's prediction echoed in my mind. 1 year, then failure. I was only 4 months in and already breaking. I called my best friend from college, the only person who truly understood what I was trying to build. "I think I'm going to quit," I told him, voice hollow with defeat. "Maybe they're right. Maybe this is just illusion." His response was measured. "You once told me your algorithm was better than anything on the market. Was that true, or were you lying to yourself?" "It's better," I said without hesitation. "The approach is fundamentally different." "Then give it 3 more months," he said. "If nothing changes by then, I'll personally help you apply for readmission. But don't quit because you're scared or tired. Quit because your idea was wrong and you haven't proven that yet." That conversation became my turning point, not because circumstances changed, but because it forced me to separate physical discomfort from intellectual conviction. My body was exhausted, my bank account was depleted, but my idea was still sound. The next morning, I picked up an extra shift at the coffee shop. I sold my beloved collection of vintage programming books, the only non-essential possession I'd kept from my Stanford days. I used the money to rent a more powerful cloud server. I stopped spending on anything that wasn't essential to survival or development. I cut my food budget to $3 per day, oatmeal for breakfast, rice and beans for dinner, no lunch. I set myself a deadline, 3 months to get a paying client, or I would admit defeat. Those 3 months would change everything. After 18 grueling months of 16-hour days split between making lattes and coding, I finally completed the beta version of my AI-driven analytics platform. PreCog could now track user behavior patterns across websites and apps, identifying potential drop-off points and suggesting optimization strategies with unprecedented accuracy. The software was ready, but I faced a tremendous challenge. How does a nobody, a college dropout barista with no connections, get his product in front of decision-makers at major companies? I couldn't afford to attend networking events where entrance fees started at $500. I had no warm introductions. Cold emails seemed like shouting into the void. But I had one advantage: desperation breeds creativity. I spent 2 days researching the email patterns for 50 CTOs and digital strategy executives at Fortune 500 companies. Most corporate emails follow predictable formats: first initial plus last name, first named, last name, etc. For each executive, I studied their public interviews, LinkedIn profiles, and company earnings calls. I crafted personalized messages highlighting specific challenges their companies faced, using exact quotes from their own statements. Each email ended with a bold claim: PreCog can increase your conversion rate by at least 23% within 90 days, or I'll refund every penny. The claim wasn't arbitrary. My tests had consistently shown improvements between 23 to 31%, but I chose the conservative end to make sure I could deliver. For 3 days after sending these emails, my phone remained silent. I checked my inbox compulsively during coffee breaks, hoping for any response, even a rejection. Nothing. On the 4th morning, while wiping down tables before opening, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject: Predictive User Behavior Solution, 23% conversion increase. The message was brief, intriguing claim. If half true, worth discussing. My office, Thursday, 9 a.m. Business formal required. Security will have your name. James Mitchell, CTO, Nexus Tech. Nexus Tech was no small player. They operated one of the largest e-commerce platforms in the country with annual revenue exceeding $2 billion. My hands trembled so badly I dropped my phone, cracking the screen I couldn't afford to replace. This was it, the opportunity I'd been working toward. But I had 2 immediate problems. I owned no business formal attire, and the meeting was in downtown San Francisco, miles from my apartment. With $127.53 in my account and 3 days until the meeting, I made desperate moves. I called a former classmate who'd joined a consulting firm, swallowed my pride, and asked to borrow a suit. "Holy shit, you're still pursuing that AI thing?" he asked, surprised. "I thought you were back at Stanford." When I explained I'd been working on it while making coffee, he laughed, then apologized. "Sorry, man. It's just nobody does that. People talk about grinding, but they don't actually do it." He lent me his second best suit and a tie, adding, "Don't get coffee on it." Ironic, right? I picked up 2 additional shifts at the coffee shop to cover transportation costs. I practiced my presentation in the bathroom mirror during breaks, refining my pitch until every word served a purpose. The night before the meeting, I didn't sleep at all, partly from anxiety, partly from excitement, but mostly because I was fixing a critical bug in the demo I planned to show. The morning of the meeting, I woke at 4 a.m. after barely an hour of sleep and took 3 different buses to reach Nexus Tech's gleaming headquarters. The borrowed suit was slightly too large. My friend had warned me I'd lost weight, but I'd safety pinned it as best I could. In the lobby bathroom, I splashed water on my face and gave myself a final pep talk. "You belong here. Your product is exceptional. This is your moment." Security issued me a visitor badge, and an assistant escorted me to a conference room on the 37th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. The table was made of polished walnut, and the chairs were real leather, worth more than everything I owned combined. I set up my laptop while trying to control my racing heart. At precisely 9 a.m., James Mitchell entered, a tall man with silver hair and piercing eyes that matched his reputation as one of tech's most discerning executives. "You have 30 minutes, he said without preamble. "Impress me." My hands shook slightly as I launched PreCog, but my voice remained steady. "Nexus Tech's mobile checkout flow has a 67% abandonment rate," I began. "Based on your last earnings call, that's costing you approximately $42 million annually." Mitchell's eyebrow raised slightly. I had his attention. I continued, "PreCog can identify exactly where and why users are abandoning their carts in real time, with specific recommendations for fixing each issue." What was scheduled as a half-hour meeting stretched to 3 hours. After the first 15 minutes of my demonstration, Mitchell called in his head of digital strategy. 30 minutes later, their VP of customer experience joined. By the end of the second hour, 7 executives were crowded around the conference table as I ran PreCog through increasingly complex scenarios. "Show me how it would handle our mobile checkout flow," one executive challenged. I pulled up their mobile site and ran it through PreCog in real time. "Your abandonment rate spikes here, here, and here," I pointed out, highlighting 3 specific steps in their checkout process. Based on user behavior patterns, PreCog suggests these specific modifications. I displayed the recommendations, which included subtle UI changes and process simplifications. The room fell silent. Those are exactly the pain points we identified in last month's user research, the VP of Customer Experience said finally. It took our team 6 weeks and hundreds of thousands of dollars to surface those issues. Mitchell leaned forward. And you identified them in minutes, with no prior access to our internal data. By the end of the 3rd hour, we weren't discussing if they would become a client, but how quickly we could implement PreCog across their platforms. The meeting concluded with a $150,000 pilot contract, more money than I had seen in my entire life. I maintained my composure until I left the building, then found a quiet corner in a nearby park where I finally let the emotions flow, relief, validation, and overwhelming gratitude for my own stubborn persistence. I called my friend who had lent me the suit, voice cracking as I told him about the contract. "Holy shit," he said again, this time with reverence. "Are you going to tell your family?" The question gave me pause. No, I decided. Not yet. They wouldn't understand a pilot contract. I need something undeniable, something they can't dismiss as luck or a fluke. That night, for the first time in 18 months, I checked into a hotel instead of returning to my apartment. I ordered room service, took a long shower, and slept on an actual bed with clean sheets. When I woke the next morning, I had a moment of panic thinking I dreamed the whole encounter until I checked my email and saw the signed contract from Nexus Tech. The Nexus Tech implementation was a resounding success. Their conversion rates improved by 27%, exceeding even my bold claim. More importantly, word spread. Mitchell, impressed by the results, mentioned PreCog to his counterparts at other companies. Within 6 months, I had 10 enterprise clients and enough revenue to hire my first employees, brilliant programmers who believed in my vision enough to accept modest salaries in exchange for equity. I moved operations from my tiny apartment to a small office in Soma. I quit my barista job with no fanfare, simply telling my manager I was pursuing another opportunity. The regular customers who had been served by a secret tech founder for over a year never knew. Then came the email that would catapult everything forward. The subject line read simply, PreCog, investment opportunity. A partner at Sequoia Capital had heard about my company from a client and wanted to discuss funding. After 3 rounds of intense meetings where I was questioned on every aspect of the business, they offered a series of funding round of $2.5 million, valuing PreCog at $7 million. I signed the term sheet in their elegant Sand Hill Road offices, wearing a properly fitted suit this time. As champagne was poured to celebrate, the partner asked casually, "So, who else are you considering for your board?" "Any former professors from Stanford." I hesitated, then decided honesty was best. Actually, I dropped out to build PreCog. My family still thinks I'm a barista. His eyebrows shot up. They don't know about any of this? The company? The funding? I shook my head. I'm waiting for the right moment. He studied me for a moment, then laughed. Well, with this valuation, I'd say that moment has arrived. But I wasn't ready, not yet. I wanted more than success. I wanted undeniable, irrefutable success. Something that would forever silence the doubt. Something no one, not even my skeptical uncle, could dismiss. The series of funding transformed PreCog overnight. We moved from our modest office to a sleek space in downtown San Francisco with panoramic views of the city. Our team expanded from 3 to 30 within a year. We launched new products, secured patents, and expanded our client list to include household names in e-commerce, social media, and finance. Through it all, I maintained my secret from my family. Our phone calls became increasingly infrequent and awkward, me dodging questions about my coffee shop job, them carefully avoiding mention of my failed tech dreams. My parents had stopped asking when I would return to school. Instead, They'd shifted to subtle comments about cousins receiving promotions or family friends whose children had graduated from medical school. My double life required increasingly elaborate deceptions. When my mother asked for my mailing address to send homemade mooncakes for Mid-Autumn Festival, I gave her my old apartment address, which I maintained solely for this purpose. When they suggested visiting, I invented business trips and barista training sessions. When they asked why I sounded tired during late-night calls, I blamed early coffee shop shifts rather than late investor meetings. The cognitive dissonance became almost surreal. By day, I closed multi-million-dollar deals in boardrooms with sweeping city views. By night, in calls with family, I was still their disappointing son who had thrown away his potential. "Have you thought about community college?" my father asked during one call. "You could take night classes, work at the coffee shop during the day." "I'm happy with my path for now," I replied carefully. "Your cousin Jenny just became head surgeon at Shanghai General," my mother interjected. "Remember when you two used to compete for math awards?" The comparison stung, but also fueled my determination. Each achievement I kept hidden, each new client, each revenue milestone, each industry award became another brick in the foundation of the revelation I was building. Then came the email that would change everything. The subject line read, "Forbes 30 under 30, final selection." I had been nominated months earlier by a client, but assumed nothing would come of it. The email confirmed I had been selected for their prestigious technology category, with a feature story and photo shoot scheduled for the following month. I sat alone in my corner office, staring at the email for nearly an hour. This was it, the undeniable, public validation I had been waiting for. Forbes 30 under 30 was something even my traditional parents would recognize as legitimate success. The timing felt almost cosmic. The Forbes gala would take place almost exactly 2 years after my uncle had predicted I would be begging for my old job. Rather than simply telling my family about this achievement, I decided to reveal everything in a way they would never forget. I arranged for first-class plane tickets for my entire family, parents, uncle, and younger sister, along with formal invitations to the Forbes Gala in embossed gold lettering. I sent everything in elegant packaging with no explanation beyond. "Your presence is requested at this special event. Formal attire required. All expenses covered." The confusion that followed was expected. My mother called immediately, her voice tight with worry. "Michael, what is this? These tickets must cost thousands of dollars. How can you afford this? Are you in some kind of trouble? Are you involved in something illegal?" The concern in her voice revealed their persistent perception of me, still the struggling barista, unable to afford such luxuries through legitimate means. I reassured her that everything was legal and proper, but refused to explain further. "Just trust me," I said, "all will become clear at the event." "Your father thinks it's a scam," she whispered, "or that you've gotten mixed up with loan sharks." "It's not a scam, Mom. It's important to me that you all come." After much discussion and several more concerned calls, my family reluctantly agreed to attend. We arranged to meet directly at the venue, an opulent ballroom in San Francisco's most exclusive hotel. On the night of the gala, I arrived early, dressed in a custom tuxedo, a universe away from the borrowed suit I'd worn to my first business meeting. As a featured honoree, I was seated at a prominent table near the stage. I watched the door nervously, checking my watch every few minutes. When they entered, the contrast was jarring. My family looked uncomfortable and out of place among the tech elite and celebrities who filled the room. My father wore the same suit he'd worn to my high school graduation, slightly too tight around the middle now. My mother had styled her hair carefully and wore her best dress, beautiful but noticeably simpler than the designer gowns around her. My uncle scanned the room with suspicion, clearly wondering why they had been invited to such an event. Only my sister seemed excited, eyes wide as she spotted a famous actress across the room. They were escorted to their assigned table, directly in front of mine, but facing away. They hadn't seen me yet. I watched as they whispered among themselves, my father checking the invitation card repeatedly as if searching for clues. The event began with cocktails and networking, followed by dinner. Throughout the meal, I remained hidden from their view, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the conversations around me. After dinner, the recognition ceremony began. Each honoree would be called to the stage with a description of their achievements. As they approached my name on the list, I stood and moved to the side of the room where I could observe my family more clearly. The announcer's voice filled the ballroom. Our next honoree transformed the field of predictive analytics with an AI platform now used by over 50 Fortune 500 companies. After dropping out of Stanford to pursue his vision, he built PreCog into a company valued at over $50 million in just 3 years. Please welcome to the stage Michael Chin, founder and CEO of PreCog Analytics. The look on my family's faces as they turned and saw me walk to the stage is something I will never forget. My father's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to astonishment in the span of seconds. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her champagne glass slipping from her other hand and shattering on the floor, the sound lost in the applause. My uncle froze mid-sip, his glass suspended in air, eyes wide with shock. And my sister jumped to her feet, screaming, "That's my brother," loud enough to draw smiles from nearby tables. I gave my acceptance speech with surprising composure, thanking my team and mentors. I didn't mention my family's doubt or my secret struggle. This moment wasn't about vindication, but celebration. As I concluded, I looked directly at my family's table and said, and finally, I want to thank those who unknowingly gave me the greatest motivation of all, the determination to prove that unconventional paths can lead to extraordinary destinations. As I stepped down from the stage, my family remained rooted in their seats, still processing the revelation. Industry leaders and investors approached to congratulate me, while my own family watched from a distance, as if observing a stranger. It was my sister who broke the ice, rushing over to hug me fiercely. I knew it, she whispered in my ear, her voice a mixture of excitement and accusation. I knew you weren't just making coffee all this time. Nobody works that hard at a coffee shop. My parents approached more hesitantly, their expressions a complex mixture of pride, confusion, and lingering hurt at being kept in the dark. My father, a man of few words, simply gripped my shoulder, his eyes wet with emotion. His hand trembled slightly. The same hands that had once stocked grocery shelves to pay for my education now rested on the shoulder of a son he barely recognized. My mother touched my face gently, as if confirming I was real. "All this time," she whispered. "All this time we thought." Her voice trailed off, unable to complete the thought. My uncle approached last, extending his hand with newfound respect. "It appears," he said quietly, "that I was mistaken about you." The admission clearly cost him, but there was a glimmer of pride beneath his humility. Later that evening, surrounded by tech luminaries and journalists, I introduced my family as my earliest critics and greatest motivation. The Forbes photographer captured the moment, my arm around my father's shoulders, both of us smiling, the cover story headline already drafted. The secret rise of PreCog, how a coffee shop barista built a tech empire without telling his family. After the gala, I invited my family to my home, not the tiny studio they imagined I lived in, but a spacious penthouse apartment in one of San Francisco's most prestigious buildings. As they entered, their eyes took in the evidence of a life they knew nothing about. Industry awards lining the bookshelves, framed magazine features on the walls, breathtaking views of the city I now helped shape. "Please sit," I said, gesturing to the living room where I'd arranged for a late dinner to be catered. For several minutes, no one spoke. The weight of revelation and 2 years of misunderstanding hung heavy in the air. My father broke the silence first. "Why?" he asked simply, his voice thick with emotion. "Why didn't you tell us?" It was the question I'd anticipated, yet now that the moment had arrived, I struggled to articulate an answer that wouldn't sound like accusation. At first, I began carefully. I wasn't sure I would succeed. I didn't want to disappoint you again if I failed. But later, my mother pressed, when you had clients, funding, you still said nothing. You let us believe you were struggling. I looked at my uncle, whose prediction had burned itself into my memory. I needed to prove, to myself as much as to anyone, that my path was valid. That leaving Stanford wasn't a mistake. My uncle shifted uncomfortably. So you deceived your family for 2 years to prove a point? No, I countered. I built something meaningful while carrying the weight of knowing my family thought I was a failure. Every time we spoke, you asked about the coffee shop, never about my ideas or dreams. You had already decided those weren't worth discussing. The words hung in the air, sharper than I'd intended. My mother's eyes filled with tears, and I immediately regretted the accusatory tone. We were afraid for you, she said softly. In our world, in our experience, security comes before passion. A stable job before entrepreneurship. We couldn't understand why you would risk everything on an uncertain future. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. When I came to America, I had to abandon my engineering career. No one would hire me with a Chinese degree. I took the safest path to provide for our family. His voice cracked slightly. I didn't want you to struggle like I did. For the first time, I glimpsed their perspective clearly. Their concerns weren't rooted in lack of faith, but in their own experiences of hardship. The immigrant mentality of security first, dreams second. The fear that America might not reward my talents as it hadn't rewarded theirs. I understand that now, I told them. But sometimes the greatest risk is not taking one at all. My sister, always the most perceptive, changed the subject. Tell us everything, she said. From the beginning. I want to hear about your first client, your first employee, all of it. For the next 3 hours, I shared the full story, the sleepless nights coding in my tiny apartment, the rejections, the breakthroughs, the first client who took a chance on an unknown founder. I showed them the early prototypes of PreCog, explained the technology in terms they could understand, and outlined our growth strategy. As the night progressed, the tension gradually dissolved. My father, an engineer at heart, became fascinated by the technical aspects of PreCog. This prediction algorithm, he said, pointing to a diagram I'd drawn, it's similar to something I researched at Beijing University, but much more advanced. For the first time since I'd left Stanford, we connected over technology. I showed him our codebase, and his eyes lit up with understanding and pride. This is elegant work, he said finally. Truly innovative. My mother, watching him engage with my work, smiled through her tears. You always did teach him to solve problems, she told my father. Remember the robot kits you bought him when he was 5? The conversation continued until sunrise, moving from technical discussions to family memories to plans for the future. By morning, something fundamental had shifted between us. The walls of misunderstanding had begun to crumble, replaced by a fragile bridge of new respect. My father, who had once cried at my decision to leave school, now asked if I needed help expanding into Asian markets, offering his connections and knowledge of Chinese business culture. Your grandfather was an entrepreneur before the Cultural Revolution, he revealed, a piece of family history I'd never heard. Perhaps the spirit skipped a generation. My mother, practical as always, began making lists of potential investors from our extended family network. Your second cousin in Taiwan owns a semiconductor company, she said. He always liked you. Most surprisingly, my uncle, whose dismissal had cut deepest, asked if I would consider taking him on a tour of PreCog's offices. I have some experience in business development, he said tentatively. Perhaps there might be some small way I could contribute. In the weeks and months that followed, our relationship transformed completely. My parents moved from reluctant acceptance to enthusiastic advocacy. My father joined PreCog's advisory board, contributing his engineering background and decades of business experience. My mother, leveraging her extensive network in the Chinese American community, helped arrange meetings with potential investors and partners. My uncle, in perhaps the most unexpected turn, became our liaison for Asian market expansion. His extensive network and business acumen, previously dismissed as old-world thinking, proved invaluable as we navigated the complex landscape of international business relations. On the first anniversary of the Forbes revelation, we celebrated together at the grand opening of PreCog's new headquarters, a 16-story building in downtown San Francisco with our name illuminated across the top. As my father and I cut the ribbon together, he whispered to me in Mandarin, "If I had known then what I know now, I would have supported you from the beginning." "You did support me," I replied. "Your doubt gave me something to prove." He smiled, understanding the paradox. Sometimes the people who challenge us most contribute most to our success, not despite their skepticism, but because of it. PreCog continued its meteoric rise. We expanded to international markets, opening offices in London and Singapore. Our valuation soared past $120 million after a successful Series B funding round. The team grew to over 200 employees worldwide. And through it all, my family was now by my side, witnessing each milestone with genuine pride rather than from the shadows. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about business strategy or technology innovation. It was about understanding that people's doubts often stem from love and concern, not malice. My family wasn't trying to crush my dreams. They were trying to protect me from what they perceived as inevitable disappointment. And in my own way, I had doubted them too, doubted their capacity to understand and support my unconventional path. 18 months after the Forbes revelation, my father and I stood together at the opening of PreCog's new headquarters, a 16-story building in downtown San Francisco with our name illuminated across the top. As we cut the ribbon together, he whispered to me in Mandarin, "If I had known then what I know now, I would have supported you from the beginning." "You did support me," I replied. "Your doubt gave me something to prove." He smiled, understanding the paradox. Sometimes the people who challenge us most contribute most to our success, not despite their skepticism, but because of it. From Stanford dropout to Forbes cover, from being called a hopeless dreamer to leading a global tech company, my journey has been defined by perseverance in the face of doubt. The coffee shop barista my family pitted is now the CEO they proudly introduced to friends. The computer games they dismissed have transformed into an AI platform reshaping how businesses understand their customers. But here's what I want you to take away from my story. The voices telling you no are often coming from people who care deeply but simply can't see your vision. Their skepticism doesn't have to be a roadblock. It can become your most powerful fuel. When I was coding until 4 a.m. in that tiny apartment, surviving on ramen and determination, what kept me going wasn't just belief in my product. It was the memory of my uncle's certainty that I would fail. It was the image of my mother's tears. It was the desire to transform their disappointment into pride. The sweetest moment of my success wasn't signing the multi-million-dollar funding agreement or seeing my face on Forbes. It was watching my father's expression transform from confusion to astonishment to pride in those few seconds as they called my name at the gala. It was hearing my uncle admit he was wrong. It was giving my mother something to brag about to the very relatives who had pitted her dropout son. True success isn't measured by valuations or magazine covers. It's measured by the moments when our achievements allow us to heal wounds, bridge divides, and bring people together. My company may be worth millions, but my reconciled relationship with my family is the real treasure I've built. If someone has ever told you your dreams are impossible, a parent, teacher, friend, or spouse, I want you to remember this. Their inability to see your potential isn't a reflection of what's possible. It's simply evidence of the limits of their imagination. Has someone important in your life ever dismissed your dreams or told you that your path was a mistake? How did you respond? Did you use their doubt as motivation, or did it hold you back? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I share weekly insights on entrepreneurship, overcoming obstacles, and finding success on your own terms, especially when that means taking the road less traveled. And here's a special opportunity. If you're working on something revolutionary but feeling doubted or discouraged, comment BREAKTCHRUJH below. I'll select 5 of you for a private mentoring call where we'll discuss your specific challenges and create a roadmap to get you from where you are to where you want to be. Remember, in 20 years, you won't regret the chances you took. You'll regret the ones you didn't. Whatever dream you're hesitating to pursue, maybe today is the day to take that first step. Who knows? Perhaps a few years from now, you'll be the one sharing your success story with the very people who said it couldn't be done. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.